Josef Finsel.
Hey there, Dave.
How are you?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Good. You are a DBA.
I am.
And
a developer.
And you're also a cloud computing guy?
I am. I've been exploring a lot about Azure.
All right. And tell me about, I want to combine those together. What's moving databases to the cloud?
Well,
it sounds awesome, but it scares me.
And it should. To move the databases to the cloud, you actually have to rethink your entire concept of how we do databases.
Okay.
If you look at SQL Server, it's a relational database management system, and it has a lot of overhead. That's why, if you start having a site that you need to scale up, you have to get a bigger and bigger SQL box, and eventually you have to get more and more SQL servers that cluster together.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, when you do a simple insert to a table, that's a transaction, because SQL Server also has to update any indexes, possibly split the database and add more data, check foreign key constraints, possibly do triggers and all this other stuff.
Okay.
And that takes a lot of time. So Azure Table Storage, that's their database sort of version where you store data, is real simple. You can put stuff in, you can get stuff out. There is no extra overhead.
Well, there's no extra overhead that you see, but there is some overhead going on that they're taking care of.
But not as much, because there is no indexing, there is no stored procedures, there is no joins, there's a whole bunch of stuff the SQL Server does. I mean, for us as developers, SQL Server does a lot of grunt work.
Sure. I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding. If I'm talking about Azure data storage, isn't somewhere behind the cloud, isn't there somebody doing that same grunt work?
Well, yes and no. As far as I know, they actually are using SQL Server, but the SQL Server tables have no indexing.
Okay.
There are no joins. It really is as simple as, I'll give you my comparison, is if you're building a website and your front page is going to get thousands of hits a minute, it really should not be an ASPX page. If you make it a static HTML page, it runs much faster.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to keep compiling it. So even if it's something you want to update a lot, you want to update it every 30 seconds, it is a better thing to have an HTML page there that you replace every 30 seconds somehow than to have the ASPX, which gets generated in caching. It's all sort of messy.
Okay.
So Azure Table Storage scales the same way. With the same hardware that SQL Server can run on, it can run more hits per second, for example.
Okay.
Because all it's doing is putting data in, taking data out, and not worrying about all the joins and stuff.
Okay, so that's the goodness of Azure. Now I have a database that I'm managing. It's kind of expensive in terms of processing and all the grunt work has to do. I want to move that data out to the cloud, and now I don't have not only do I not have to worry about that because it's abstracted away from me, but a lot of it isn't even happening.
That's true.
Things should be faster. If I have to take into account this latency because I'm calling a service, but there's some complications as well. I have to change things.
I think the best way to put it is that it's simpler in it gets its scalability from its simplicity, but that actually makes it more complex for us as developers. Because if we want to, good example, SQL Server will return a set of columns from a table. You can't do that. You just get the entire XML block from a Azure table record.
Okay, so we're going to process your result sets.
So
different.
You have to process your result sets, and you can't do joins. So now if I actually have information, your typical parent-child, where I could do a join in SQL Server and get the data back, I either need to get all the records from the parent and then go get the children records in a separate call, or I need to actually create a materialized view, basically.
Okay.
Which you can do, but you have, that's something we need to maintain. SQL Server would do that for you. And the real key to understanding Azure Table Storage is understanding that SQL Server guarantees that everything is going to be there. If I insert a record and it's going to show up in my join because it's either going to roll back or it's not, it's all the transaction. In Azure Table Storage, especially if you are creating a materialized view, you're going to insert your record here. A call may get made to your materialized view, which is not going to contain that record because you're going to have to write an Azure worker role that's actually going to process that and say, oh, I've got this new record, now I need to add it to the materialized view. So there's
What
a
is
latency.
I'm not familiar with that term, materialized view. Can you define that?
It's sort of like SQL Server will let you create a view that's permanent.
Okay.
So instead of having to actually make the join every time,
Okay.
whenever
That's
you
a
update
view.
that, you have,
I know what a view is.
well, but it has a way that you can make a view that is actually not just a join.
Okay.
So it'll actually store a copy of the data in view form.
Okay. And that's a materialized view.
That's a materialized.
Okay. All right.
So you have to sort of do that yourself.
Okay. And you do that on the client, basically, if you're using this Azure storage. Right?
Well, yeah, no, actually, what you'd do is you would use another part of the technology, use the Azure worker role
Okay.
to actually then say, okay, you've added data, now I know about it, I need to go add another row to your other Azure table storage view.
Oh, okay. I see.
And then, but the big thing is, as a database developer or as just a regular developer, is it's a latency issue. One of the challenges you'll need to overcome is it's faster, it's more scalable, but it might not be immediate. If you go and add a record, it'll show up right away if you make a call for that record.
Huh?
But if you're trying to add a couple of views or do something like that, in which case we have to do the programming, it takes a little bit more to get it out. So,
Oh, okay.
it'll get written, then the queue manager has to see it and process it. And, it's like if you want to do a transaction of any sort, Azure Table Storage doesn't support it, but with Azure Worker Roles and the queues, you can actually do a sort of a transaction. And the other thing is in the web, because everything has to be disconnected and repeatable, you have to rethink a transaction from being an immediate thing to more of a saga role.
Saga?
Saga. So a saga is where you might register for an event, and that would start your saga. It's the transaction, but it could be long running because maybe it's a credit card transaction,
Okay.
which someone else has to process.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just having a single transaction, you do it and it's done. You sort of have to have a log of what's going on so you can see that the transaction is in a sort of pending state, and this has been done and this has been done. And then as a developer, we also need to say, well, what if it fails? How do we handle that? And it gets a little more complicated.
Sure. And then we deal with this. So in SQL Server, by default, a transaction simply locks resources and then rolls them back. It doesn't really commit the changes until you tell it to commit it.
Exactly.
But in BizTalk, for example, there's a lot of long-running transactions going on in BizTalk that can take days.
Exactly.
And they have this concept of a compensating transaction.
And
so if the transaction fails, you have to code ways to undo
yes.
what
And
happened.
I think the best way, because my standard transaction example has been a bank account.
Sure.
You put the money in, you try to you take it from one account to another, and if it's wrong, you reverse it.
Right.
Well, you don't, you just undo it.
Yeah, and if one of
But
those
if
things
bank
fails,
doesn't, the bank would, they would reverse it. So I would have the $25 deduction from my savings account, and then I would have a $25 credit to my savings account because it failed.
I see.
It's
As opposed to seeing it at all.
as opposed to it not showing up.
Okay.
So it's sort of a mindset change that a lot of DBAs don't have.
Okay, that's what you need to do in you call it Saga, but I think Saga sounds like it's very similar to creating compensating transactions
Yes.
for long-running transactions.
Well, compensating transactions there's actually three of them, I forget. Compensating transactions are one of them. But yes, if you're going to do long-running transactions, it could take days. You do have to have a way to compensate for it, to reverse it, but not to undo it. Because SQL Server always says that when you roll back a transaction, it sets the database to the state it was before you started it,
Right,
which is why it's so blocking.
right.
So, as opposed to just doing it a different way to undo it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So now, just to clarify, so if I've got a database, an existing application, I'm storing in SQL Server, and I've decided to move it to Azure Database.
Azure Table Storage.
Azure Table Storage. Essentially, I need to rewrite my entire data access layer. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, probably.
Okay. But then I can do that in such a way that I can abstract out the interface to that data access layer, and the rest of my application must be protected from that.
Yeah, if you've written if you've got a nicely designed data layer, then yes.
Okay.
So if you're using classes already, a customer class that handles all of your interactions to the database,
Uh-huh.
then you have to do some work to replace that.
Right.
but it wouldn't affect the rest of the application.
Okay. Anything else we need to do?
Lots, but check out Azure. I've got a website, azuredba.com, and that's basically
Okay.
where I'm documenting my journey through Azure.
Okay,
And all the aspects.
AzureDBA.com.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Not a problem. Do it again.